These canyon walls carry my tune. The only one to hear my song are the coyotes and the wolves. But if I drink enough of this flask, I can hear them sing your song too.
Hi, this is Robert Leiterman with the Bluff Creek Project Podcast. We're pretty much out here in the middle of nowhere in Washington State, undisclosed location, and we're with some members of the Olympic Project, and we got some questions for you. You guys have been working on a pretty interesting project lately and staying pretty busy at it. You guys have been working on it for a couple of years now. You guys want to talk about that project? It has something to do with the nests or something like that?
Yeah, no, absolutely. So,
Yeah, before we get started, why don't you guys go ahead and introduce yourselves?
Hello, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Todd Hale.
I'm Chris Spencer.
And Shane Corson here.
Great, yeah. Tell us a little bit about that project you guys are working on. You guys have been working on that for a while, and you told me a little bit about it, and it's pretty intriguing. And you kind of share with other people. You got to get a little flack for it, but it's a pretty interesting project. So if you guys could tell us about it, that'd be great. How it first got started and how you guys got involved with that.
Yeah, it's a very interesting project. Probably, honestly, a lot of people don't know this. It's half the reason I moved up to Washington. I lived in California and Oregon, and then when these nests were discovered by a timber surveyor, and I got to view them, these nests. I thought, man, I have to get involved with this, and I have to be closer to the Olympics. And so I moved up to Washington State. So, 2016, a timber surveyor was out marking a trail that was going to be timbered, a certain distance from a certain creek up here in Salmon Barron Creek up here in Washington. And this individual involved with this timber company had been doing what he does for 27 plus years. And as he's out there marking a future timber cut, flagging it, he came across some ground nests. And these ground nests to him, originally he came across 3 of them. And it's a very remote area. We're talking 2.5 miles behind a lock gate and way off trail. He came across these ground nests. And so he came across these ground nests and he got weirded out. He'd never seen anything like this in all the years he's been out in the woods. And this timber surveyor, he's bumped into bear and cougar, and he's seen every sort of rat nest, every sort of nest you could imagine. Been in the most gnarly situations in the woods, and Robert, you know well, being with what you do or have done, being retired now. But this guy, he was very experienced man, and so he came across these nests, and he got a little weirded out because they were fresh nests, they were large, and there wasn't just one, there wasn't just 2, there was 3 of them. That's what he came across originally. And so he actually backtracked out of there, being weirded out, and got a hold of his boss, the owner of the timber company, and their family. It's a family-owned company. And they talked about it, and eventually they got a hold of Derek Randles of the Olympic Project, co-founder of the Olympic Project. The reason they got a hold of Derek was because 10 years prior, Derek, by trade, is a landscaper. And knowing that Derek has been in the woods a lot and seen a lot of stuff, being a guide, being a hunter, and all that, they got a hold of Derek because maybe Derek had seen something similar. They invited Derek Randles of the Olympic Project out there and James Millian of the Olympic Project joined him. There was a couple of DNR, Department of Natural Resources, individuals that came out to this nest area. The owner and the surveyor came out to this area to show them, to showcase this nest area, or nest find. And when they got out there, every single one of them was blown away by what they were looking at. These large ground nests that not one of them have ever come across before in the woods. All their experience, and we're talking about 250 years of woodsman experience combined.
How would you? Sorry to interrupt, but so listeners have an idea what this nest is like. I mean, How would you describe this? I mean, how tall, wide, and what is it made of, or what makes it so unique? Why is it that these people stumble upon this thing and have no idea what it is? Or, I mean, what's so special about this?
Well, I mean, special to us and special to those that viewed it. Many individuals from academia, biologists, bear experts, zoologists have looked at these nests. And what's special about them is that they're predominantly, I mean, all made out of huckleberry boughs, evergreen huckleberry. And by boughs, I mean, we're talking about, in this area, the huckleberry can grow up to 9 feet.
That's pretty tall.
Very tall. And some of those huckleberry breaks were over 9 feet tall and stripped. And what these nests were constructed from the huckleberry. And most of these nests, with the exception of a few, are bathtub shaped. Not circular, but bathtub shaped. Made over a foot in depth of huckleberry boughs with a large indentation in the center where a large weight, not dug out, but a large weight has sat down in the nest. So you basically got this bathtub shaped nest.
How tall? I mean, off the ground, what, 2 feet?
Oh, over I mean over a foot and a half.
Okay.
Yeah, but all huckleberry, over a foot and a half. You know, some range, and they vary in size. Yeah. These nests vary in size. You got some that are over 8 foot in length, by 5 or 6 foot in width, and then you got some that are smaller, and they're combined together. You don't just have one nest. You have multiple nests in one area, very close in proximity, which I think is profound. Because you could probably speak to this, Robert, as well, but black bear usually don't, it's not a black bear behavior. They don't make multiple nests in one area of multiple sizes, let alone any other animal out there. So you have these nests that are over a foot in depth of huckleberry. But one of the things that's really intriguing about these nests is not just the location, which is on a finger ridge coming down a ridge line, is the fact that you have this formation of nests that are kind of like in a V formation. The original nest find was in a V formation, very strategic, very military-like. And you also have in this area bush nests, which we call bush nests or practice nests. These nests are built into the huckleberry off the ground, 2 or 3 feet off the ground. And they kind of mimic what's on the ground. And it's very primate-like in that value.
Also, all the huckleberry, it was like a lot of it was transported because there's such a great amount of huckleberry in each nest. It wasn't like an animal just took the huckleberry right there and bent it down and create this nest. They had to transport it from yards away. I mean, the original nest site, it's a thick barrier you can hardly get through. I went in 2017, and we were practically crawling on our bellies to get to it. And when you get to the end of the point, about 90, I think it's 90 feet by 60 feet, all the huckleberry is just destroyed. All of it. You just come into this, out of all this thick stuff, you come into this open area where stuff's been mashed down and these 7 nests in this formation, and then you have the drop off to the creek. So nothing can come in from behind you, and you have a very quick in and out down to that creek, and then you can move up whichever direction you want. To me, when I saw it in 2017, the nests were degraded, but they're still impressive. I'd heard about it, but when I saw it, I was blown away. There's no way. I'd heard, well, maybe it's bear. Nah, and all the nests were created at the same time. It wasn't like a bear was coming back over years or months and making a new nest. These nests the huckleberry were all the same age. It was all created at the same time. So you had multiple individuals making nests at the same time in the same place. So
say, I understand this. You have branches from the huckleberry that were broken off, and you could see the locations where they all came from, and they were brought there, and you guys were able actually to match some of those branches from the exact location.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. And sometimes it was over 25 feet away. I mean, if not further, you can match a branch where it was, especially so. Basically, on these nests, you have larger branches on the base with the smaller ones on top. And when we deconstructed the nest with Dr. Meldrum had noticed that some of the huckleberry boughs were pushed into the ground, and the nest was formulated around it.
Oh, so like Like you put your anchors in, and then you weave in the rest of it?
Like a frame.
Okay.
Like a frame, yeah, absolutely like a frame. And no teeth marks, no claw marks.
No cut marks.
No cut marks, right. So we could rule out a lot of things right there. No teeth marks, no claw marks, no cut marks. This was something, whoever built these nests is very thoughtful. I mean, very intelligent. They were constructed in an intelligent manner. And, and one of the really cool things I thought, you got all these multiple nests, different sizes, which took a lot of work. Derek Randalls and I reconstructed a nest, rebuilt a nest as an experiment. Between the both of us working together, it took us over 45 minutes. And we thought we had built one of these really well. And we watched it degrade over time. And after that, we realized that we didn't collect near enough material. It was actually, we had done not a good job. We collected what we thought was enough material, but once it degraded, when we watched the original nest degrade, we realized we didn't collect enough material. That blew my mind, that much material was collected. What that told me was that whatever was staying in this area, and it had to be multiple individuals based on the size of the nest. I mean, I shouldn't say have to be. I assume it was multiple individuals that were staying in this area. We realized that these weren't an overnight stay. This was probably a lengthy stay. And what that length is, I don't know. A couple of days, a week, who knows. But the sheer amount of huckleberry was very, very impressive. The sheer amount of huckleberry collected, the amount of time, the different heights, from a foot off the ground collected to over 9 feet.
Yeah.
Over some of that stuff was 2.5 inches in diameter. I mean, impressive strength to break it. No teeth marks, no claw marks. Once again, the amount of strength, and then to push huckleberry boughs and create like this, like I said, this frame was very impressive. And just this, the sheer area. And I described the nest area this way. Like Chris mentioned earlier, you're walking, you can't see this nest from above. You can't see this nest area from above. The canopy's too thick. From a distance, you can't walk in on it and see it. You literally have to walk into it. So if you're looking at a house, I compare it this way. You see a house. You see the house, which I call the huckleberry. See this wall. But you don't know what's inside the house until you open that door. When you walk into this area and see the devastation of huckleberry snapped off, and it's not just that, but I mean, you're walking in there and then you're like, wow, I'm in the room. I'm in this house. I see the nest laid out. There's a lot of fascinating things here too, is the huckleberry boughs. Yes, we had everything was stripped, broken off. But a lot of the huckleberry, the leaves were plucked off the huckleberry. So you could see, just cleaned huckleberry. And you would find piles of huckleberry piled up. Why? I don't know. I got a lot of assumptions and ideas there. But there was huckleberry. So, once again, no teeth marks, no claw marks. But what you would see is a pile of huckleberry leaves. Something had to pluck those off and pile them up next to the nest. Were they going to eat that? Was it going to be put into the nest? I don't know. But one of the fascinating things I really found, having spent a lot of time in this area, was that when I sat in one of those nests, and I'm sitting there, and I'm looking around, you got the point nest, what we call the point nest, because it's kind of a V formation. Okay. You think of a flock of geese flying through the air.
Yeah.
The fascinating thing I thought was that when all those leaves were plucked, and some of the huckleberry boughs lower down were not just broken off, or
they're twisted out.
Some of them were twisted out of the way. And when I sat there, I thought, okay, why would I twist this? Or why would I move this out of my way? Well, I have a direct view of that nest, that nest, that nest. I have a direct view of every nest there. So you move the leaves, you twist stuff around so that you can see in your house. Imagine you're in your house and you have a cabinet that you can't see the TV. Well, how do I see the TV? I have to move the cabinet. I have to move this and that. And that's exactly what I was sat there in that nest, and I thought, this is genius. This is smart. This is smart. If I want to see a smaller nest, I want to see that practice nest, if I want to see another nest, I have to move this bough out of my way or move the leaves to have a clear view of everything in that area. And that's exactly what we came across.
The point nest also had 2 softball-sized rocks sitting next to it, and they'd been hit together. There's score marks on them. They're just sitting next to each other. And that was the point nest as if it was a V formation.
Yeah.
That nest right there is on point, and then you have the drop off to the creek, and there's these 2 rocks right there.
Well, look, let me backtrack a little bit. Yeah. So I call it the point nest, or we call it the point nest. But so, like I said, V formation. There's one of the larger nests was at the front.
That was interesting.
Very cool.
What was that?
Yeah. We just heard some kind of a call or something.
Very cool. What we've come to call the point nest, it's kind of like a triangular shape. It would be the at the forefront there. It had, and which leads down to the seasonal creek, the easy access and in and out of this area.
Yeah.
Quick escape. There was James Millen came across, having been through this area, came across these 2 rocks that were above ground. The only rocks in this area that were above ground, softball size roughly, right by this large nest, and they were just sitting there. I mean, just stood out.
Well, what do you think the significance of the rocks would be? I mean, used to break the branches off, or?
So, when he picked up those rocks, they had obvious score marks on them.
Been hit together.
Yeah, they had obvious score marks on them.
Yes.
So they had these white marks on them, where something or someone had struck those rocks together. The interesting thing about that is, if those interested in the Sasquatch phenomena, is it's assumed or thought that Sasquatch may utilize rocks for communication or rock clanking.
Yeah.
And so we did experiments out there early on with not those rocks, but other rocks. When you clank those rocks together, even with that seasonal salmon creek running pretty good, you could hear them on the other side of this ravine, the other side. So maybe it's a form of communication. I don't believe they were used to break off branches or anything like that.
Right.
I mean, everything was either broken off or stripped, peeled.
Okay.
Those rocks were, and once again, as David Ells always says, we're throwing spaghetti at the wall and see what sticks.
Yeah.
It's a thought process. We hypothesize that maybe it's a form of communication. If these are indeed Sasquatch nests, if they indeed are.
That is fascinating, because you don't see those very often.
No.
And the people who found these you said they were like resource people. They stumbled upon them, and then you guys found out about it.
Oh yeah, well that's what I'm saying. That's the whole thing. Is that the Leiterman project didn't find. Now, to date we found 24 nests in total. Okay. But originally this was a timber surveyor out there doing his job. And historically speaking, there have been other nests found, historically speaking. And they're almost always found by somebody involved in a timber company. I mean, and many people don't even know this, that in 1967, what happened? October 20th, Patterson Gimlin.
Yeah.
The Patty film. Well, Scorpion Creek. And you've been there, Robert.
Yeah.
And I was fascinated when I followed you and heard that you had been there. Daniel Perez did an interview with a gentleman by the name of Lyle Laverty.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. And he came across a nest above Scorpion Creek, which feeds into Bluff Creek, which is basically a stone's throw away. And I thought it was fascinating that there was a nest found that it boggled his mind at that time, but he was involved with the timber industry. These nests are found predominantly by people in the timber industry. Why? Why are they found by those guys? Because they have a job to do, and they have to get in the woods, in remote areas that not many people, these aren't places people want to hike to. They're not areas people are going to hunt in. They're rugged, they're brutal. These areas people have a job to do, and that's why they go to these areas, and that's where these nests are found. This nest area has not been logged in 50 years. Okay, this nest area we're working on, it's not been logged in 50 years. And I think that's significant. So there's a lot of, and way off trail, 2.5 miles behind log gate. The only people really going in there are loggers.
Right.
When they go in there. It's not being timbered. So most of these areas are left alone. They're not, it was originally going to be timbered, and they gave us permission to look into this area and figure out what the heck's going on. They were bamboozled by it. So point being is that nests that are found historically are always, almost, not all the time, but found by timber surveyors. And we've just been very lucky because, though nests have been found historically, never in this number. And now we're studying them, and there's so much more to it. People argue about, well, they're this or that. Don't get me started. They argue about it's this or that. We found 24 of these to date. Todd Hale and I came across something making one back in 2020, and this close to Buell made one, which was phenomenal, scary but phenomenal. There's been a lot of people. You know, I'm a avid hunter, hiker, fisherman, outdoorsman. I'm not a scientist. I know that. I'm not a scientist. But when you bring in scientists, people from different backgrounds, and they got to view them in their initial state, and they're blown away. They're like, I don't know. This isn't bear behavior. This isn't that. You know, one of the So, I mean, I've been told that, they're wood rat's nest, or the newest one that came out recently was eagle. It's an eagle nest. I'm sorry, and I have to laugh at this because they can say, okay, you know, Shane, you know, yeah, you've been out in the woods a lot, and you're an avid outdoorsman, but you're not seeing everything. Oh, no, I haven't. I get that. But a lot of individuals have been out in this area that are experts in their field. When you're talking about multiple nests. We're not talking about like one solo nest like an eagle's nest, which is relatively solo. Eagles basically can spend 35 years in the same nest, adding to it. There's no, I mean...
What would be in that nest?
Well, there would be... Go ahead, Chris.
Okay, I've raised a lot of birds, hatched a lot of birds. Birds are filthy. There would be feathers and bird crap everywhere.
Yeah, right.
There was none of that in these nests. There was some unknown hair in these nests. That's another one that gets skipped over. I hear online all the time people talking about there's no hair found in it. No, that's BS. There's a bunch of hair found in it, and it doesn't match up with any known species in North America. So, yes, there's more to the nests, and they're not avian, and that's a ludicrous suggestion. And I've seen it so many times over the last couple weeks via Todd sending me the pictures of the post that it's just like, yeah, you have to laugh at it.
Here's the
Do eagles leave human-like tracks 14 inches?
No, not that I'm aware
Do eagles leave handprints?
No.
Right.
Oh, okay.
There's a lot of so it's not just we have these ground nests. There's a lot of other information, a lot of finds that once again, nobody can say 100% Sasquatch made these nests. I get that.
Yeah.
Not the argument. My argument's always been, okay, you can say it's not Sasquatch, but tell me. You know, everybody argues about, oh, it's this or that. Tell me what made these nests. Because you know, the wood rat thing always blew my mind because I grew up in, you know, for a lengthy period of time in California. I spent a lot of time in Oregon and Washington, Idaho. Wood rat's nests, I mean, there's feces there, there's urine. Just give an example of why it's not any of that. These nests were intelligently constructed. Something built these out of green huckleberry, not dead brush, not anything. These were stripped, stripped, broken off, and constructed. Multiple size nests over hundreds and hundreds of yards. You had the original nest area, which was about 7 nests, and then you go about another 70 yards through a ravine up to the next knoll or plateau coming off the ridge, and there'd be 3 or 4 nests there. And you go another 100 yards or whatever, and there'd be another set of nests. These were stretched out, all made, relatively speaking, at the same time. What blows my mind is that this is not bear behavior. This is definitely not eagle behavior. I mean, yes, it's relatively close to a creek, but in the middle of the woods with the huckleberry growing over it, it's ridiculous. And then, like Todd alluded to, we have not just hair. We got hand casts. We have foot impressions.
We have a lot of audio.
And audio too.
Oh, yeah. Well, we'll get to the audio in a little bit. Too.
And talk about medicinal purposes of evergreen huckleberry.
Well, yeah. Then we get into the theory of what we're dealing with. So, I mean, if Sasquatch is the maker behind these nests, and based on a lot of our work, and there have been sightings in this area, and it's got historically, once again, there's a lot of sightings in this area, and there's a native, I can't give up the native name for this area because
understandable.
But and I'll give kudos to Squatchermetrics, West with Squatchermetrics, and you find him on Instagram and on Facebook. Just that guy's a fantastic resource, a brilliant mind, and a good friend of the Olympic Project. And anybody that's listening should he doesn't get enough credit. But I give him credit here. He asked me one day, he goes, well, these nests are all made out of huckleberry. I mean, fresh huckleberry. And of course, huckleberry, gives off, the huckleberry, which is a great nutritional source. He asked me, so is there any nutritional value, well, obviously the huckleberry, but with the leaves? And I said, you know what, Wes, I'm an idiot. I never thought about that. So he looked it up, and of course, there is. So back in the day, they used to give women a concoction of huckleberry leaves and sugar after childbirth to regain their strength. And way before I knew that, one of our running hypotheses was that I don't believe Sasquatch makes nests all the time, if they make nests at all. I don't believe that. But the fascinating thing was that if they make nests periodically, say like orangutans, orangutans make nests a lot, but they give birth every 4 to 8 years, 6 to 8 years. And I thought, well, these nests aren't found very often. If Sasquatch is making nests, we'd probably, regardless if it's the timber agency finding them, we'd find more of them. The huckleberry leaves have a medicinal purpose. Like I said, a concoction of sugar and the leaves to, after women give childbirth, they regain their strength. They help regain their strength. And I thought, well, shoot, if a Sasquatch is making a nest, or whatever's making these nests, when you find these pile of leaves and they're plucked off and there's piles, and whether you want to eat them or add them to the nest, there is a medicinal purpose. I mean, bears know what to eat. Dogs know what to eat. Cats know what to eat to relieve certain issues in their body. They're very smart. Why wouldn't if Sasquatch is giving birth and utilizing the huckleberry and they're eating the leaves, and a lot of things about the leaves too is not just the medicinal purposes, but a lot of like gorillas, for example, they'll drink out of a creek and all that, but a lot of their water source comes from the leaves. That's where they get a lot of their water, is from the leaves. So there's a lot of interesting comparisons when it comes to the huckleberry leaves. And, a lot of Sasquatch sightings are around huckleberry. I mean, of course, bear and everything else. Everything's attracted to that. Why you got the berries and everything else. But I thought it was fascinating that Wes came up with that idea, which to me was like a no-brainer, to look into the medicinal purposes. And lo and behold, there's very kind of added to our idea that if Sasquatches make a nest periodically, and we're once again throwing spaghetti at the wall here, thinking that if they make every nest every 4 to whatever years in this area, and once again Todd Hale and I came across a brand new one in 2020, which is about 5 years later, in the making. It kind of adds to our idea that this is an area that maybe they come in and build nests, and maybe it's a birthing site or a nursery, or maybe Sasquatch makes nests all the time, or maybe they don't make nests. Who knows?
So you guys stumbled upon it. You didn't see anything making this nest. You just stumbled upon it, and then after you stumbled upon it, I think we talked about it, that the construction of it stopped.
Yeah. Go ahead, Tom.
Yeah, it didn't seem to return, but
yeah,
the huckleberry was collected. It was piled up, and Shane brought in the brown paper yard bags, or what, 30 gallons?
30 gallon from Home Depot, to collect the material. Yeah.
So this thing left the area, apparently never came back, and the material that it had collected so far was 6 of those bags. And
8.
It was piled.
8 of those bags.
Oh, 8 of those bags. It was piled. I thought it was 6. Piled up like it was getting ready to build a nest. It was collecting material. But as soon as we got into that area, as soon as we went up the rise, you could see all the huckleberry destruction. And it was fresh. Mm-hmm. All the huckleberry breaks were glistening in the sun, white, shining white. And that's when we were like, oh, okay, we got to get out of here. We'll call Derek. Yeah. We'll come back tomorrow, because we were in a situation.
Well, yeah,
we knew we were in a situation. I don't want to go too much into that, but yeah.
No, we once again, long story short, is an area that Derek Reynolds and I have been viewing. And it's not the same. It's about 1,200 feet away, different ravine, but an area of interest, because Derek and I, a couple weeks earlier in January, this new nest building was discovered at the end of February. Derek Reynolds and I were in an area, and we were looking for, once again, but it was the same MO. We were always looking for a western-facing slope with a salmon-bearing creek, a lot of huckleberry. So we have a couple ideas that we're running with, and it seems to fit the pattern.
Oh, you need to mention the original nests were found in what month, and you estimate when they were built.
Yeah.
And why we were looking for new nests in that month.
Yeah, we assume, based on, so this timber surveyor that came across the original nests, he found them in May, but they had been vacated probably at least a month, if not 2. And so we assume that these nests were made, the original nests were made in the months of, February or March. Okay. So we kind of ran with that, based on how the huckleberry was, degrading and all that. So we found a new area. I shouldn't say we found. Derek had been looking at this new area, not that far away, but just a ravine we kind of ignored. And Derek and I went in there in January of 2020, and we came across these really old-looking things. I'm like, maybe that's an old net. We really didn't know. It was very old-looking, but they had the same kind of depressions, but very, very degraded, probably 6-7 years, if they are, in fact, even nests. We weren't real sure, but we're like, it's just an interesting area. It's a vast area. We need to look into this further. So I invited Todd Hale out, and we started to send, a week or 2 later, and, actually a couple weeks later, because it was toward the end of February, and we started to set up camp, and I said, hey, Todd, before we finish our camp, let's hike out to this ravine so I can show you what we're going to be looking at, the following day. Yeah. We're not going to do anything. We're just going to beeline it there and beeline it back. It's going to get dark. I want to set up camp. We beeline it out there, and as we're beelining it out there, we're getting closer and closer to this ravine. And I started hearing movement, and it was very large. I heard branches breaking and stuff. I'm like, oh my gosh, that's something big. So I stop, and Todd had fallen down on the ground, and he's, Todd, he's got a sailor's mouth. And so he's like, he goes, it's nasty. You're going through huckleberry. It's nasty.
Everything's wet. Everything's mossy.
It's slippery.
It's thick, and it's thick, and it's not. You have to have a passion to go through this crap.
It's not easy.
It's not easy. And we get up there, and he falls down. And I said, shut up. Listen. And I'm hearing this thing, and it's coming at us. And Todd, like I mention all the time, and only because Todd mentions it, Todd's deaf. This guy listens to heavy metal music. He's a motocross guy. He's, ridden bikes his whole life out in SoCal.
I don't know if you know, but I work construction. I drive a truck.
He's deaf. This guy's deaf. But the thing was,
asleep. He didn't get that one.
Well, the thing is, this guy's like deaf, and he was hearing it. That's how loud it was. It wasn't like, we run into black bear quite, I should say quite frequently, but frequently, and they'll beeline it, or you never see them. You'll hear them, but this thing was coming at us, and so I stood up. I'm standing there, and I drew my weapon out, and Todd was hearing it. He was like,
"Oh yeah."
Todd heard it. I'm like, okay, if he's hearing it, okay. And this thing's coming at us. So he draws his weapon, then it stops, and it goes back down into the ravine, or down the hill a little ways. And as we're listening, we're standing there. It circles up behind us, goes down a ways, circles up behind. We can hear it moving. And I got a little nervous. I ain't gonna lie. I got a little nervous. I thought, oh man, we're a lower spot here. This thing has got us jumped, and it's circling us.
Got the high ground.
Yeah. And I'm like, and I've heard people go, oh, well, cougars do that. Yeah, but cougars did not make the sound and come through the brush like this thing. Cougars are very, very stealthy.
Cougars are small. This thing sounded huge.
Yeah, it sounded huge. So I'm thinking bear or elk. That's the 2 things in my mind, bear or elk. But this thing, but the circle around us, I'm like, okay. Well, Todd and I backtrack. We go back up the hill, and we're waiting, and I can hear it moving, and then it kind of dissipates. We don't hear anything anymore, and Todd goes, hey, let's go back down and check out where we originally heard this thing. And at first, I'm like, I don't know if we should do that, because it's getting dark, and I'm like, oh, let's do it. So we go back down after we didn't hear this thing moving anymore. We backtrack, go back down there, and as we're going back down to where we originally heard this thing, I start seeing kind of this path through the salal, which is a ground-based, overgrowth.
Yeah, it's ground cover.
Yeah, ground cover. Yeah, and salal berries are awesome.
You can eat those.
Yeah. So you got the salal there, and it's pretty tall, but there's like something's been moving through there. It's fresh, like smashed down. And I see that, and I see this stump, or not stump, this fallen log, and something has smashed this log. It is a dead log, rotten log, but someone smashed it, and it looked really flat. And so as I'm following this trail, we go through there, and Todd and I look up where roughly this thing was originally at, and that's like Todd had mentioned. Started seeing huckleberry boughs broken off, as far as I could see in this area, probably 60 feet. From a foot off the ground, once again, to like almost 8-9 feet off the ground, and they're fresh. I mean, glistening. And I got really excited. I got really excited because in all the years, those first 23 nests we came across,
Yeah.
and 2 of them were bush nests off the ground, constructed like the ground nests. The first year we came across those 23 nests, going through this area, the original nest area, we after that we kept looking in other areas. We didn't find anything, and I got a little frustrated. And then 2020, we're out there, and I'm seeing all these huckleberry bough breaks like the original nest area, and I told Todd, I said, "There's a nest here. There's a nest here. I know it." And we stopped because I thought, I do not want to touch anything. I don't want to, I just don't want to contaminate anything, because if there is a nest, I want to bring in the right people into this area.
That's a good idea.
Oh, no, I don't. I'm not a scientist. I have no business collecting crap. Found it, boom. So we backtracked, and when our plan was to, get out of there before dark. It got a little spooky. So we're going to get out of there before dark. I called Derek and I said, "Derek, we found some huckleberry breaks. We had this experience. You got to come out tomorrow. Let's get this ball running." And Derek, I'll be honest with you, Derek, on the phone, he didn't sound that enthused. Like, I'm like, you gotta be kidding me. I was like, "Derek, I mean, we came across something, I think, significant." And he's like, "Oh, we'll come out there tomorrow. I'll bring Tori and his wife." And so I'm like, this guy, it was just like kind of a, sure you did, sort of thing. Because we've been looking for so long. And I'm like, "Derek, I thought So the next day, Derek comes out. He drives all the way out there, and we hike out. We find the location. We're hiking in there, and I'm showing Derek this path we saw, kind of showcase the whole area, everything we experienced. As we're getting in there, Derek looks up and he sees all these huckleberry bough breaks, and he goes, "Holy crap! This is exactly like the original nest area." I said, "Duh, yeah." And we hadn't ventured that far in there, so as we get further and further in there, finally we come across this ginormous pile of huckleberry. I mean, starting formulating into nests. I mean, ginormous pile of huckleberry. And Derek screamed out loud, scared his wife. And I remember Tori going, "We got to get out of here." Because it was like fresh. Something was had collected spent all that time collecting the huckleberry and piled it up. We had disrupted it. And it was just one of those cool experiences, very profound to us. Seeing all the huckleberry breaks and this huge pile of huckleberry, different sizes,
Yeah.
We're talking 1/4 inch to 2.5 inches in diameter, collected.
Of the branches.
Branches, yeah. Now fast forward. Once again, we didn't touch anything, and we got a hold of Dr. Meldrum. We were gonna fly Dr. Meldrum out, but I didn't want to stop there. Right. Meldrum's obviously involved with the Bigfoot world, so to some, it's gonna be tainted because he's involved. So I was reaching out to veterinarians. Everybody I can get my hands on that. I thought, I want to get a really outside of the Bigfoot world. I want Meldrum involved. Meldrum's a good friend of the project. He's been involved with this. I wanted his opinion and have him involved, and his resources as well. And I was going to reach out, and I started reaching out to wildlife biologists that had nothing to do with Bigfoot. And I didn't mention Bigfoot or nothing.
Right.
Well, what happened around 2020 there, February?
Oh,
March.
Something about COVID or something like that. Yeah.
Brutal. So Meldrum was going to fly out, and we had to cancel that because it was just the first case was in Washington.
Right. Yeah.
So everything was up in the air. And so we canceled. He said, "Don't take the chance. We don't know what this is about. Don't take the chance." We canceled this flight. And then I couldn't get a hold of anybody. I couldn't get a hold of anybody from academia, basically. The ones I was reaching out to, because everybody was worried. And so I'm like, crap, what are we going to do? And so the weather was about to turn south. It was about to turn awful. And I was thinking, well, nothing's come back. The weather's about to turn south. I mean, bad rain, wind, all that. I'm like, there's a lot of samples out there. And I don't know what this COVID thing is. I don't know where it's going, but it sounds bad. And so I talked to Derek and said, "Derek, we need to get in there and just collect stuff." let me backtrack just a little bit real quick.
Yeah.
There was a hand impression found during that time frame between talks with Meldrum coming on that James Milling had found, where this hand impression, 2 hand impressions were found. Both were casted. One turned out pretty good. Where this thing, James Milling had walked down the trail to see where this thing had possibly, when Todd Hale and I had originally heard it, where it had gone down the ravine and then circled around us. And he found these 2 hand impressions that were below this hill behind a log, where it would have been possibly looking up at us and then circled, like pushed itself up the hill. And so he had found that.
So just to interrupt for a second. So you're talking about hand impressions being the soil was pressed in, softer soil, leaving the handprints.
Yeah, exactly. The impression, yeah. One, you could see, the cast speaks for itself, but you could see the thumb and the fingers and the palm was pushed down heavily. Okay. The other one was more like the fingers were dug into and it's a very heavily, a lot of pine needle and whatnot. So the cast, the second, the right hand didn't turn out that great.
I want to add something.
Yeah.
Where it went down and around and behind us, leading up to those hand impressions, was a path of destruction in the ferns straight up the hill, right to that spot.
Were there any fronds broken off, things pulled out? Do you remember?
I didn't go down there to investigate, but when Cliff and I were casting the handprints, you could clearly see a wide path of destruction straight up that ridge right there.
And that's where
the ferns were smashed.
Yeah.
I mean, it was crystal clear.
And that's where the sound was coming from when you guys heard it circling around.
Right.
So
that's pretty scary.
Whatever left those handprints seemed to have come right up that ridge right there. So after finding those handprints and seeing that, everything seemed to make sense on what happened. And Derek had gone down and found out where it took off down originally.
Right.
So again, here's a nest being possibly made right next to an edge of a ridge going down to a creek.
Same MO.
And when we were walking in there, this thing bailed right down the ridge.
It disappeared from you.
Yeah.
It's the same kind of pattern.
The same pattern, same
time
MO.
of year,
I mean,
same situation, same kind of location. These things, if someone enters that area, they can drop down in seconds and they're gone.
So all these sites are similar in terms of escape routes, proximity to creeks.
Western facing slope, creeks, salmon-bearing creeks, the huckleberry, the thickness, the distance from the finger or the plateau to the creek, which is significant too because they're all similar in distance to the creek.
And usually a steep drop-off down to the creek.
So a quick escape, steep drop.
Absolutely.
Now, all these nests, are they found within a quarter mile of each other, found within a half mile of each other, or miles of each other?
Hundreds of yards.
Yards.
So
yards.
That's pretty close.
Oh, very close. Yeah, yards. Yeah, I mean, you know, basically, if and I'll describe it this way as I do in my presentation because I think it's important. So if you got your hand here, right, and you pull out your fingers, you kind of spread them out. You got your knuckles would be the ridge.
Okay.
Your fingers would be the plateau or the fingers, and then you got these. You know, if you imagine in between each finger a ravine, you would have at the tip of your finger would be nests, and then you drop down into the ravine in between the finger, and you pop back up to the next finger, and there'd be more nests there, and then another, ravine in between your fingers, and then another.
They're
bunch
all
of
in
nests.
those points.
All in the points.
Right.
Yeah, in clusters, not one, not two, per se. In one case, there was one. Yeah.
So you either have the drop off to the ravine, or a wall of huckleberry on the other side.
Right.
So you can't see these unless you stumble upon them. They're like,
Correct.
oh, look, there is something up there. You have to actually stumble upon these.
Like I said,
it's a wall of huckleberry, or a drop off to a ravine.
If you're down
to
in
the
the creek and look up, you're not going to see anything.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, it's like walking. Like I said earlier, you got this wall of huckleberry. If you compare it to like a house, you can see the house, right, which would be the huckleberry. But you can't see inside the house unless you open up the door. You have to walk into this area to see the nest. And when you walk in there, the devastation is tremendous. And I think it's fascinating that I think whatever stayed in these nests, did it for a couple days to a week, maybe a little bit longer, maybe not. depending, the depressions in this nest were huge, but it's fascinating that you could go from finger to finger, leave a little impression there, little devastation that won't be seen unless you walk in there, but not so much like you don't damage anything on the outskirts, like you don't bash in the walls of your house, to see inside. It's very strategic and very smart how these things were constructed and where they're at and where they're placed. Now with this new nest we came across in 2020, like I said, COVID hit, all that. I got a hold of, and after the hand impression was found, I got a hold of Cliff Barrickman because he's a good friend of ours, and he's been out to the nest area before, the original nest area. And I said, hey, Cliff, because Derek and I had said, okay, we're not getting anybody out here. COVID's hitting. Let's just go collect everything. I talked to him. I said, Derek, I just want to go collect the material, look for hair. Let's go find if there's any impressions and cast them. Let's just get this done and do the best we can as laymen. And so I got a hold of Cliff Barrickman, and I said, hey, Cliff, here's what's going on. And so Cliff's like, he shot up like the next day. And he helped cast, took 15 pounds of plaster to cast the hydrocal to cast the hand impression, because it was on a slope. It was on a hill. It wasn't on a flat. It was on a hill. Okay. And so he had to build a base and put the plaster in there. So we cast the hand impressions, and then we go over, and this is probably, 100 feet or so away from the original nest area.
The first one, the first one you guys talked about.
Yeah.
Not the
original, but
timber surveyor discovered.
No, excuse me. No, so that's like 1,200 feet away.
Okay.
The hand impression was found, 100 feet or so from this new nest area that Todd Hale and I walked in on, where this thing had went down the hill and circled around us. So Cliff and I, and like I said, long story kind of short here, but Cliff and I went in there, and I had bought these paper sacks from Home Depot, 30-gallon sacks, because I wanted to collect hair, but I didn't want to contaminate it in the best scenarios to put in that stuff. So I brought a bunch of sacks out there, and Cliff and I had started to collect all the huckleberry that was on the ground and put it in the sacks. As we're lifting up the huckleberry off the ground, he notices a foot impression underneath the huckleberry. As we're pulling back, and he's like, whoa, that's a foot impression. And then we see a second one to the left of that right impression we found. And originally we thought, as we're collecting that material, moving it, we thought it was a right-left foot. But what Cliff had noticed was that it was a right foot, like the thing had shifted. But what's fascinating is that all the huckleberry was being collected above and dropped. It's like it was just standing there and shifted. So if you had not moved that huckleberry,
you would never see it.
You would never see it.
And that's so it was soft under the huckleberry.
Yeah.
Talk about foot impressions. We talked about hand impressions. Did you see any other foot impressions around the old nest sites?
The original ones?
The original?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And the fascinating thing was there was 14... get into this too. There was 14-inch impressions found around that area. No hand impressions around the initial.
Yeah, okay.
And you got to understand this area, actually, it's not very conducive for tracks. It's just not. There's a lot of salal, hard ground. It's not very conducive for tracks. So to find an impression in this area, regardless, is pretty, profound. Just like many areas. But yes, there were impressions found in the original nest area. And then you get into this new nest area. Once again, Todd Hale came across a 14-inch impression that was really good looking. And then, total impressions, foot-wise, there was 4 or 5. And then the 2 hand impressions and a partial hand impression in the nest area that Cliff casted. I don't think it turned out that great because of the soil.
Right. Yeah,
but visually speaking, we took video and all that, and it looks pretty impressive.
Did you guys get some foot impression casted on those? Were those good enough for that?
Yes.
Oh yeah. And here's the fascinating thing too about this. So, they're all the same. They were 14 inch tracks. What was Patty?
Pretty damn close to that.
Yeah. And so, once again, throwing spaghetti at the wall, seeing what sticks, and hypothesizing, and just throwing ideas out there. Because I'll be honest with you, Sasquatch for me, that's a real thing. I had my encounter and all that. Doesn't matter. It doesn't matter to science. Doesn't matter to most people. But Sasquatch is not a question for me. What is the question is the who, the why, and the how, and all that. Well, you got these 14-inch tracks at this nest area we're working on, and they've been found over a period of time in multiple areas within proximity of this area. And then I was thinking about the Patty, Patterson-Gimlin thing. Yeah. And I know it's debatable, and people can argue about it, but I believe it's a real thing. But maybe I'm wrong. Who knows? But she was about 14.5 inches, whatever. And then supposedly there's a nest found in that area by Lyle Laverty. So I'm thinking in my head, the wheel starts spinning. I'm like, this is really interesting. There's a nest found in 1967, close to Bluff Creek. There's multiple nests found out here in this area on the east side of the Olympics. And we got 14-inch tracks.
Above a creek.
Yep. Salmon Bearing Creek. I mean, a lot of similarities, some differences, but a lot, like a stupendous amount of similarities. I have to look back and go, are there similarities, and what does that mean if there is?
That is fascinating because you don't hear much about it. You hear people talk, there's tree breaks, there's a few nesting sites, you got sticks piled up, but this is the first time hearing about the huckleberry, a resource that's available, that weaves in pretty well. Not like you're picking berries, get your arm stuck in there. So it's pretty sturdy, and that geographic area, that's pretty fascinating. There's another thing you guys were mentioning, it just blew me away. I don't know if you want to talk about it or not, but sounds coming from that area. Are you up for talking for that, or?
That's got to be. I've spoken enough. I think Chris should take over here. This is his forte. And
I want to mention something before we get into sounds.
Yes.
Sorry to interrupt, Chris.
That's all right.
We've collected a lot of hair, also, in the nest area, hooked into branches of the huckleberry, below the nest, etc. That's all I have to say.
No. I'll just say this: the hair.
So we have foot impressions,
correct,
hand impressions, vocalizations, hair. You know what we didn't find? I didn't find any eagle feathers.
and bird scat, evidently.
Or bird scat. No vermin scat or anything like that. But the hair is interesting. And like I said, once again, I'm not a scientist. I'll never claim to be a scientist. But the hair is fascinating, and I'm one thing I pride myself in is I can find hair. I can find hair, and I'll spend
There's
hours.
more hair with this collection than I've ever seen anywhere in my life.
That's saying a lot.
Yeah, but the hair is fascinating because with this hair that we found, I mean, and send it to, I'll be honest with you, I've not sent it to enough people, and I don't mind saying that. Need to send it to more individuals from academia outside of Bigfoot world, but Dr. Meldrum's looked at it in his lab with his students. Cindy Dosen of Homini Enigma has looked at it underneath the microscope. It lacks a medulla. This is not black bear hair. It's definitely not eagle feathers. It's not anything that is recognizable recognizable period, but especially not in the Pacific Northwest. And I'm comfortable saying it because Dr. Meldrum's comfortable saying it, is that this is primate hair.
That's fascinating itself. And going back to now, let's talk about the sounds.
Yeah.
I got to hear a little bit of this. It just, it reminds you of other Squatch-related sounds I've heard. But we're out in the dark right now, and I got to hear it, and it made my hair on my neck stand up a little bit. But and there's several of these recordings. So you want to talk about that?
Yeah. So after they found this nest, they actually, Shane and Todd both had put recorders out in that area, and I think Shane kept going back in the general area, and he captured some really crazy vocalizations, some vocalizations that I and David Ellis and others have recorded in other areas of Washington that don't match up with known animals. And I actually came out three weeks after the find, and I camped out one night and I set up one of my long-term recorders out there, and we were just listening to it the other day, but it's kind of a high-low sing-songy kind of vocalization. It's hard to describe, but we captured that month, and that vocalization I've captured right where we're at as well, and Kirk Brandenburg has captured the same vocalization right here too. And they're not coyote, they're not owl, they don't match up. We review everything with spectrogram. They don't match up signature-wise with the known animals, so they're an unknown. I suspect they're Sasquatch. That fits the hypothesis, but can't say what it is. But it's an ongoing thing in the nest area. I mean, this last year, we're leaving long-term recorders out, and we're trying to capture as many nights as possible. We've done a pretty good job of getting almost every night of 2021, and we're seeing patterns. We're working with Wes from Squatcher Matrix. I basically review the audio. I catalog every sound in the night. I record dusk till dawn, then punch it into Wes's spreadsheet. He's working on his spreadsheet right now with all the sounds, different species and everything, and then he's going to do his analytic study on it, and we'll be able to see patterns. But just from reviewing, I see patterns already, and there's definitely a circuit. These whatever's making these sounds in the nest area seems to be about every 8 to 9 days or so makes these sounds in the nest area, which tells me it's something moving through. It's not hanging out, but it's moving through the area. So that's, in a nutshell, what we've been doing, what I'm continuing to do. And hopefully, once we start running some numbers, we'll come out with some interesting patterns, comparing weather as well. Wes is, he's looking at, I'm just providing the sound information, and then he's looking at weather patterns, moon phases, what's going on, and then we can just run all kinds of different tests on it. So.
That's a lot of factors to consider.
Yeah.
Especially the time of year. We know birds are more active in spring, you get different sounds. But yeah, the sound thing, it's, how would you compare these with the Sierra sounds, or can you? I mean, it's not like vocalizations. It's just more like calls. Not like, I should say, not like samurai talk.
No, I've been doing the audio thing since 2015. And I personally have never recorded anything like the Sierra sounds.
Okay.
And I've recorded some weird stuff that some people say, well, that sounds like the Sierra sounds, but to me they're not. And I've never looked at the Sierra sounds on spectrogram. Like I said, everything I'm doing, it's not only using my ears. I use my ears, but I'm using my eyes too, because it's hard to describe. Most of the unknown stuff, it doesn't sound like canine, and it doesn't sound avian like a bird or anything. It sounds primate. And you don't learn that until you've done a lot of reviewing. Yeah. And I'm not an expert, but I've done a lot of freaking reviewing. And just this year we've captured some sounds that are pretty profound to me. I've captured in other areas stuff that sounds like gorilla, stuff that sounds humanish.
Chimpanzee, yeah.
And in the nest area, I got some stuff that sounds like chimpanzees, and I've actually done a comparison with actual chimpanzee vocalizations, and the similarities are scary.
That's scary, yeah.
They're actually
visually speaking, yeah.
Visually speaking, they're not exactly the same, but visually speaking, when you put them up on spectrogram, it's like wow. Right. And when you hear this particular vocal, I have it on my YouTube. Anybody can go look at it. My comparison. You can't mistake it. It's not an owl. It's not a coyote. I don't think a human being could actually reproduce this sound. It sounds literally like chimpanzees in the woods. So, and that was recorded May of 2021, right by the original nests that were found in 2016.
That's
so
pretty fascinating. Yeah,
we're still in there. We're still finding interesting things, and
it's an ongoing study.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
And like I'm doing the audio. I'm using a new audio recorder now. It's made by Wildlife Acoustics. It's the SM4. Extremely expensive, but it's what actual scientists use. They're using it right now to track chimpanzees in Africa. Just watched a webinar recently that they put out where a French primatologist is using these units to track the movements of the chimpanzees, and she flat out said it's 5 times more effective than using game cameras.
Bam.
And I bought one unit last year. I'm buying another unit. Eventually, when I can afford it, because it's all out of my pocket, they're about $800.
Wow.
But Chris, I thought you were rich and famous.
Yeah.
Not yet.
But
not yet.
What's nice about these units, they have GPS capabilities, and I have to buy the GPS units to put in the unit itself. But once I have one, and I have 3, their software, Kaleidoscope, once you have the GPS, it will automatically triangulate where that noise is coming from you if you have 3 units in the area.
Oh, that sounds like a pretty ingenious thing.
That's going to happen down the road here eventually. But yeah, that's what we're doing.
Yeah. And you don't go out for like the afternoon stroll and put your sound system out. They're out there 24/7 working.
Yeah, the SM4 with the battery power it has, I could hook up another external battery to it, but with the battery power it has just in the unit, and it'll hold up to 2 terabytes of memory. I've only got 128 gig cards in it right now, but that's enough for what we're doing.
Mm-hmm.
I get this time of year about 52, 54 nights. If the batteries hold out, I haven't tried it because I just started deploying it this year in September. But this summer I expect it'll get a little bit longer. But that's, we're out there more than that. We're going, because I have other units that only get about 20 nights. So we're going in at least twice a month to change out audio units and game cameras. We have game cameras in different locations. We're trying some other camera type work. So yeah, we didn't get every night in 2021, but I predict we'll probably get every night of 2020.
Chris is very humble. I just got to say this. Chris is very humble. It's one thing to record this stuff. It is a whole nother thing to go through it and look at it and put on a spectrogram and visually look at this. It's time consuming, it's tedious, but it's his passion. He owns it, and he's to me one of the top guys. David Else is up there, Mungo Hala, and others I have not mentioned, but Chris is just, man, leaps and bounds, doing amazing stuff within the Leiterman project. Spending his time, his hard-earned money on this. He doesn't get paid to do any of this, but yeah, I just got a lot of respect for what Chris does. I just got to say that.
Oh,
Well,
none of us get paid. We want to say this is all self-funded. We pay for all this.
the thing about the sound is, the more you record, because I did, when I started recording, I record in Southwest Washington, not far from here actually, and I started out in there in 2015. Over the years, because I've recorded there, it's going on 7 years now. We had some blank years, but you get to know an area. You actually start understanding that area better of the known animals. Actually, you don't get a lot of vocalizations and suspect activity. That's far and few between. You get a lot of other animals. And I enjoy that, just learning the different species. I love it when I get a new owl in there, because the barred owls usually chase everything out.
Yeah.
And every so often I'll get a different species owl, and I'm like, whoa, we got a different owl.
Yeah.
And you gotta like that type of stuff too, to keep doing it, because I don't know how many hundreds or thousands of hours of audio I've reviewed with absolutely no suspicious stuff in it. I mean,
I could definitely relate to that, looking at pictures from game cameras over and over again. You wish you just drop the little disc into a machine that just tells you what you need to know and just go away. But it doesn't work that way.
I think I told I can't remember who I was talking to, but I figured it out for 2015. The first time I started recording in my original area, I call it X1. I recorded 1,500 hours that year, and you could fit all the suspect stuff into about 5 minutes of audio.
Wow.
So, yeah, and I'm recording way more than that now. So.
And do the math on that.
Yeah.
I wanted to ask you about that statistic, audio versus game cams. Why do you think that is?
Well, it's because animals, it's hard to predict where an animal is going to be to place a game camera, and they're not always going to be moving where you expect them to move, and it's a lot easier to track sound when they're making sound versus putting a camera that's got a trigger on it that says it'll hit at 70 feet when actually it's only going to go off at 30 feet.
And do you think those animals know the camera's there?
Oh, if you look at what with chimpanzees and gorillas, yes, they absolutely do.
No.
So,
Let's talk about the Cross River gorilla.
No, we're good. That's a whole nother. That's fascinating.
Another episode.
Yeah, absolutely. No, actually, that's a fascinating thing. Oh man, gosh.
These animals are a lot smarter than you think.
Yeah, the Cross River gorilla and the people we know that search for him. But I'll just say this. I think we need to probably close up. But I'll say this. A lot of what's been shared online, photos and the Limb Project, I think, is kind of to blame for some of this stuff. I ain't gonna lie. Based on the older photos that were showed of the nest, they look like a pile of sticks. Or we've taken a lot of samples from these areas of the nest, and the photos are horrible. Photos are just horrible. And so when a lot of people are viewing these, they look like maybe circular, but sticks. The original find was all green huckleberry, fresh, and then years later, they degrade over time. If anybody wants to see basically what some of the original nests look like, go down to Cliff Berkman Museum in Boring, Oregon, the North American Bigfoot Museum down there. I did a presentation in Kelso, Washington last month, and actually spent 2 weeks reconstructing a nest, and went over really well because a lot of people, photos and video, and you could talk about it. I wanted people to actually in person see what one of these nests look like, and I spent the time. I spent a lot of money on the frame, and Derek Randall's helped me out big time with the frame of it, and I built a nest and collected a lot of huckleberry, multiple truckloads of huckleberry, by the way, and built one. And I wanted people to see what one of these nests would look like that were originally found by this timber surveyor. Well, it's being displayed right now at Cliffs Museum down in Boring, Oregon. So if anybody's curious about what they look like, and head down there and take a peek. And then I'd love to hear people's thoughts and opinions, because when I presented on this at the Kelso events, Squatch Fest, I had one or two people come up to me and go, I had no freaking idea that's what they look like. I had this different picture in my mind. I was thinking this structure. I'm like, no, when I say a nest, I mean a nest. But also there was one or two people that came up to me, and one of them was a very interesting guy who found something very similar in the 70s in the Olympics. So it's fascinating when people can see something in person and then go, oh man, well, I didn't know what it was then. I still don't know what it is now, but that's very similar. So,
I had a guy come up to me and tell me he found the same kind of thing in the Sierras.
Yeah.
Which reminds me, I'm going to tell Bart.
Yeah. So that's pretty fascinating. You're right. We have a lot of time, so I'll do that final thing on it. Thank you so much that you guys are doing it. Thank you for sharing with us too, because I know some people come up with preconceived ideas, but sometimes they don't read all the wording on it. But I'm glad you guys are sharing with that, because it lets people give a better idea of what you guys are dealing with. I take my hats off to you, because you're not a funded organization. You guys have a lot of volunteer, and you spend a lot of your personal time on these crazy ideas, like going out looking for creatures or whatever. I hear about it all the time. Evidently, you guys are zealots, by the way, just to let you know.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I didn't think I was until I was told about my wife says you're a zealot, and then, I guess I am, because
own it.
We think about it, we do it, and here we are. So we almost talked about having the Bluff Creek Project guys. You guys invited the Bluff Creek Project to join you up here looking at stuff. And
absolutely.
Yeah, I was able to make it, surprisingly, but I appreciate that. That was
it's
good.
Still open. I'll just say this too, and whether you include this in the podcast or not, it's been absolute pleasure meeting you, Robert. Absolute pleasure. It was obviously I want to see Bart and Kirk and the rest of the gang here, and David Howlett and those that are here now.
Yeah.
But absolute pleasure meeting you. Just such a gentleman, and I admire what you do. I admire what the Bluff Creek Project does. I admire what you do, and hopefully one of these days I'd like to meet Rowdy Kelly. I got a lot of admiration for him and others. But the invitation is still open. Anybody wants to come out and just hang out with us, as you did, or we came out hanging with you, however you want to look at it. But it's been an absolute pleasure, man, and just a really special time. I had a lot of fun this weekend.
Oh, yeah, we're not done yet. We've got a few more days yet.
No, I'm leaving right now.
Oh.
No, I'm kidding.
Get back. Yeah. Well, thanks again. Well, this is Robert Leiterman for the Bluff Creek Project. up here in Washington State. Get caught up with my brethrens and sisterins. And thanks again for listening. And we'll probably have some more things to cover a little bit too. All right, guys. Thank you so much.
Dude, that was a squatch.
These canyon walls carry my tune. The only one to hear my song are the coyotes and the wolves. But if I drink enough of this